All right. Now what I'm going to do something I normally don't do because we had all these Father's Day festivities and different things that took some time. I am going to skip the review. Last week we talked, if you want to take your notes home and look it over, our lesson for the review, our lesson last week of Words of Faith that give its courage in difficulties. And it was all about speaking what we believe. I believe and therefore I speak. And the Bible said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth comes, or the mouth speaks. And if you want to know where your heart is, listen to your words for a while, because those words are coming out of your heart. Okay. All right, so you say you love everyone, listen to your words. If your words don't confirm that, then you probably don't love everyone. So that's one way to get a barometer on where you are. But now, Barb, I forget, which one do you have? She doesn't know either. Jackson? Before Jackson so rudely interrupted me, causing all you to say, oh.
Well, he's cuter than you.
Yeah, he is. I can't argue it. I was ready to say, I'm going to be like the truth. Well, today we're going to talk about the truth about now.
Yeah, I like that.
A specific truth we're going to talk about, the truth about now. All right. We're finishing up 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the final three verses 16, 17, and 18 of that chapter. Verse 16 starts with, "For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day." The easy-to-read version of that scripture renders it this way. This is why we never give up. Our physical body is becoming older and weaker, but our spirit inside us is made new every day. The Greek word rendered in the King James up above there as is renewed. A Greek scholar, a biblical Greek scholar, Vincent, wrote, better is being renewed, the process of renewal going along with the process of decay. In other words, he said in the Greek, it's really saying our physical body is in a process of decaying as we get older, but our spiritual man is in a process of being renewed. All right, now, an outward man, according to David Guzik, a commentator, has the same idea. In other words, he's drawn it back to a couple other verses in this chapter, bringing Paul's words out, what he said so far. He said, when he said our outward man perish, he said it's the same idea as the earthen vessel in verse 7 of this chapter, where we have this treasure in an earthen vessel. And it's the same idea as mortal flesh in verse 11 of the chapter. The message is the same. On the outside we are suffering and taking a beating, but on the inside God is blessing and renewing us. And so we're going to be talking about some of those things today. Now, what is the cause that keeps Paul from fainting? He started this off, and remember, this is my division. I stopped at 15 and started with 16. Paul didn't change his thought process here. He's still going on with what he was talking about. So he said, began verse 16, for which cause we faint not. He said there is a specific reason we aren't giving up. Now, what reason is that? The cause of his strength is his seeing the fruit of his labor. And he talks about that in some of the earlier verses of this chapter. He talks about how all these folk that are being saved by his ministry are offering praise to God for their salvation. So because he is getting something done, God is blessing his messages with people being saved. Because of that, it enables him to carry on his troublesome journey. So now, in a very troublesome time, a very unfavorable to many message of hope is leading many to salvation. So Paul, at a very troublesome time, is preaching a message that many people despise. But it's a message of hope, and many are being saved as a result of it. Now listen, his message was not politically correct. according to the Jewish government, the government of idol-worshiping Gentile nations, or the government of the Roman Empire. His message was not politically correct. The Jewish government, I put under there, wanted Moses taught. They wanted the Old Testament stuff taught. The governments of idol-worshiping Gentile nations wanted doctrines taught that enriched the idol-selling industries. They made a lot of money on those idols. And they didn't want someone coming in and saying there's no God but God, our God. So it's politically correct. So they, even though there were people being saved in all those cities Paul went to, he got in trouble on every one of them. Because the Jews that were there were offended with his preaching Jesus instead of Moses, and the Gentiles who were offended was because he was talking against their gods. Maybe he didn't come right out and attack their gods, but he made it plain there is salvation in none other but Jesus, and he is the only way to heaven. So it was politically correct. The Roman Empire basically wanted service to the emperor taught. There were times that the emperors of Rome declared themselves to be God. And so you were competing with them when you called somebody else God. So no matter where Paul went, he went into a lion's den of people who wanted a certain type of message that was politically correct to their ideology. And lo and behold, here we are today in America. If you're not preaching political correctness, you're a hater. Now, so far they're not throwing us in jail and beating us up, but who knows what's coming down the road. So again, what made Paul's gospel so unpopular to those listed above? In essence, he taught that Moses' law couldn't save anyone. He taught that there was no idol that could save anyone. He taught that adherence to the emperor couldn't save anyone. He taught there was salvation in Jesus alone. By the way, that inward man up above there, the inward man is renewed day by day, according to people's New Testament, is the immaterial nature in contrast with the material body. I put it this way. As we'll see in chapter 5, what you're looking at is simply my house. That's all you're looking at. Paul will use the word tent. They didn't build a lot of houses in Paul's day. They certainly had some. I mean, they had some amazing structures like the Roman Colosseum and such, and the Jewish temple, which might have been destroyed by this time, depends exactly when he wrote this letter. But nonetheless, they knew how to build. But a lot of times people lived in more mobile living conditions and cheaper living conditions. So Paul uses the analogy of tent in chapter 5 to describe the body that we live in. When this tent is dissolved, we'll have another. And so we'll get into that next week. But in essence, what you're looking at is just a home that the real me is living in, the eternal me. This thing isn't eternal. If the Lord tarries, it's going to fall down one day and not get back up, and you're going to bury it or cremate it, or just pour some gasoline on it and burn it, or whatever cheapest. You're going to get rid of it. Knowing my wife, she'll get some people to dig a hole in the backyard, say a few words over it. Who knows? But nice thing about that, when you do it that way, the dogs can come and dig it up later. And this thing is not eternal. It's not me. I am operating it. Kind of like those cartoons where they put little animated figures up in the brain, operating everything. I'm operating this body. I'm living in it. I'm living in all the limbs of the body. But the bottom line is this body will die and I won't. That's the bottom line. So there's an inward man, and in every Christian, that inward man is renewed daily, no matter what's going on around us. No matter how weak and frail we get, the inward man keeps being renewed. So, all the while that Paul was not giving in to the wear and tear in his physical body, what amazing thing was happening. This is on the backside, page 35. The inward man, the real him, the eternal him, was constantly being renewed, or according to Thayer's definition of that Greek word, given new strength and vigor on a daily basis. And again, what's the inward man? The next chapter will go into that in greater detail. Now, verse 17. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding in the eternal weight of glory. Now, Robertson, another Greek scholar, writes, eternal weight of glory, he said it's a careful balancing of words in contrast. Up here you got the affliction is light. However, the affliction is being compared, I have affliction now, I'll have glory then. The lightness of the affliction now, but the weight of the glory. Up here he said the affliction for a moment. There it's an eternal. So he's giving a contrast of the two realities. Right now in Paul's reality, he was suffering a light affliction that was but for a moment, but he was waiting for an exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Now, Paul also says something similar in Romans 8:18. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Now, looking back at verse 17, our light affliction, Paul, this amazes me. Paul amazingly refers to all his troubles, his receiving 39 stripes 5 times, his being beaten with rods 3 times, his being stoned 1 time, his being shipwrecked 3 times, his being a night and a day in the deep 1 time, his facing robbers during his travels, his being persecuted by the Jews, by the heathen, and by false Christians. All that he endured and was enduring, he said, this light affliction. I'm not so sure had I written that letter, that would have been my choice of words. When you're going through all that. We tend, when we don't know the truth about now, we tend to blow everything out of proportion. Now this will shock my son. The Twins have lost the first 3 games against Cleveland Indians in a 4-game series. So I said when I was listening to the radio, they'll never win another game this year. Now that kind of stuff shocks my son. I say it every time my football team loses. They're so bad they'll never win another game. I think the only person here that can identify me is Lynn. Every time Nebraska loses, he doesn't think they'll ever win again. He and I are brothers, but I tend to over-exaggerate things on the negative side especially. It would be hard for me, I think, if I had been beaten 39 times, on 5 different occasions, 3 times with rods. If I've been hanging onto a board for a day and a night in the deep, if any of those things that have been happening to him happened to me, thrown in prison, wasn't in there, he said in that area of chapter 11 of 2 Corinthians, he said in prisons oft. He spent time in jail. Do you know that he's got 3 of his epistles, I couldn't name them right now, but 3 of his epistles were written from prison. They call them his prison epistles. You wouldn't hardly know he was in prison. He might make a passing reference to it. He doesn't dwell on me. He wants to talk about him. The only reason he listed his troubles in chapter 11, it's an interesting story. The false teachers are bragging on themselves and bragging on themselves. He said, you want me to brag on myself? All right, here goes. But if I'm going to brag, I'm going to brag about the things I suffered. And so he said, you got me to act like a fool. He doesn't like to talk about himself. Why doesn't he talk about his troubles? Because in Romans he said they're not worthy to be compared with what's coming. He knew the truth about now. So no matter what you did to him, what was important to him was who could he tell about Jesus? Wherever he was. in prison, beaten up by robbers along the journey, stoned and left for dead. No matter where he was, he wanted to know, where can I find someone to preach to, testify to? Paul did not have his mind on now. So he called these things, which were overwhelmingly anything but light affliction. But in his reality, they were light affliction because it was a comparable word. He was comparing it to something else. Now, let's go down. What important truth is Paul teaching you and me here? After I went through that list where underneath I put the passage that came from 2 Corinthians 11, 24 to 26, along with our current verse 17 up above. What important truth is Paul teaching you and me here? Life isn't always what we wish it was. How many ever found that out? Life isn't always what we wish it was. Sometimes it's downright unbearable by our own strength. But it is bearable when we look to our Creator for strength. Now, how are our troubles working for us? That is, for our advantage. Paul had this deal. Look at verse 17 again, up above. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, works for us. Our troubles are working for us. Now, what's the product of what they're working for us? A far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. So Paul is saying, those troubles to you and I are just bad times. But the truth is, God is making them work together for our good. All things work together for the good of them that love God, right? So how are they doing that? Listen to how Peter discusses it. 1 Peter 5, 8 to 11. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. How many of you know you got an enemy? Yeah. And his name's the devil. And I'm going to tell you something, Paul believed he was real. Not only was he real, he said he's your enemy. Your adversary. 9, verse 9, whom resist in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. So what's he saying? The devil is walking about, seeking whom he may devour. What's he mean by that? He means when you're facing this, understand that your Christian brothers and sisters around the world are facing the same affliction. He's talking about how the devil, who can't physically touch you because you're God's child, stirs up people all around you to touch you. And it's happening everywhere in Peter's day. He said it's happening to Christians everywhere. They were suffering persecution, not just Paul, not just Peter, not just James. Christians everywhere in the first century church were being physically persecuted. And Peter refers to it as the devil seeking to devour you, to destroy you. If he can't change you, he wants to kill you. So you'll shut up. One or the other. If he can get you to backslide and turn the other way, great. But if he can't, because then he'll make mockery of you to all the people you taught. But if he can't, he wants you dead so you can't talk anymore. He said he's seeking to devour you. How many of you know when you devour an apple, it isn't there anymore? Yeah. It's gone. Well, maybe the core is there. There are some who eat the core. Never have done that. If you devour a hamburger, better example. If you devour the hamburger is gone. The devil is seeking to devour you, and Peter likens that to the afflictions Christians are suffering in his day. So the devil was stirring up persecution to shut up the church, and it never worked. He's not doing much to the church in America right now. He's starting to rear his ugly head with political correctness, calling us haters and such. But he's stupid. You shouldn't call him names. He's stupid. He's had this Christian giant in America asleep forever. Hardly doing anything, because we're at peace, we're at rest. He's not content there. So he's doing what he always does, stirring up people to call names, and pretty soon, just like there was a crazy guy who tried to kill some Republican congressmen, he'll stir up some people who want to harm Christians because we're haters, because we don't believe what the political correctness doctrine teaches. And pretty soon persecution will break out. But you know what history proves over and over and over again, and he never learns. When you persecute the church, you don't shut it up. It stands up with more determination, because when you get weak, God's strength becomes stronger in you. He pushes you back against the wall, and all of a sudden, you become the Hulk. You get angry at what the devil's doing, more than what the folk are doing. You get angry at what the devil's doing. And you'll say, watch me. And you go out there and boldly defend the gospel at whatever cost it is. And if we get to where Paul was, and we know the truth about now, we will see it the way he saw it, this light affliction. Whatever you throw my way is a light affliction, and it's working for my benefit in the next life. Now, how can that happen? How can trouble benefit me in the next life? We're going to heaven because we're saved, but we get rewards for our works. And when you boldly endure the persecution thrown your way, you get greater glory in heaven. In other words, your rewards are more plentiful. And so Paul said, bring it on. It's a light affliction compared to what God has for me over there. You can't move me because you got nothing that you can do to me except get me there quicker. That's the only thing you can do to me, with Paul's attitude. Now, look at verse 18. While we look not at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. Now listen, for the things which are seen are temporal, are temporary. But the things which are not seen are eternal. So, what gave Paul the ability to look past those horrifying persecutions endured? He knew the truth about now. When we are facing absolutely horrible situations, and thus far, our horrible situations have not compared to Paul's horrible situations. Nowhere's close. How many have ever been beaten 39 times with a whip?
No.
How many ever been beaten with a rod? How many ever hung on a board a day and a night in the deep?
Not me.
How many of you were ever robbed on your journeys? How many of you were ever thrown into prison for your preaching? Our troubles are nothing compared to Paul's. But, doesn't matter. When you're going through them, they feel big. They're not as big as Paul's, but when you're the one going through them, they feel big, right? They feel overwhelming sometimes. Now, what helped Paul get through his amazingly light afflictions? He knew the truth about now. And what is that truth? That those horrible things will not last forever. He said, I'm not looking at what is seen, because he said that's temporary. He said, I got my eyes on what I can't see. That's eternal. When you know the truth about now, I'm going to tell you, sometimes you can go through something for 15 minutes and it feels like an eternity.
The dentist?
But the truth is, those 15 minutes came and gone like every other 15 minutes you ever lived. Now, you might have been a little more bruised as a result of those particular 15 minutes, but they came and gone. But the really good news about the truth about now is that not only is it temporary, it doesn't make the journey to heaven with you. You have no bruises from it, no scars from it, no bad memories from it, nothing. You get some rewards for enduring it, but you got no baggage from those bad moments. There's nothing. I wrote some good notes here, and I want to make sure I get to them, so I'm going to shut up for a minute and go back to here. The truth about now is that those horrible things will not last forever. It might seem at times that our troubles will never end. But the truth about now is that everything we see is transitory. It's coming and going. It's temporary. And while our troubles might seem to last for 1,000 years when compared to eternity, they only last for a moment. And that's what Paul said, our light affliction, but for a moment. What if you'd have been kidnapped as a baby, brought up by a lunatic, and he put you in a basement somewhere and tortured you your entire life, fed you? He didn't want you to die. He wanted you there for his delightment of torturing you. Some sickle. How many of you know those sick people like that?
Yeah, there is.
And so your entire life, once you're old enough to know anything, is being tortured and screaming. Somewhere, somehow, when he was gone, you found some article within your reach in your locked up area that somehow introduced you to the gospel. And in your desperate state of living hell on earth, you grabbed a hold of that thing, knowing that the chances of you ever getting out of where you were almost non-existent. You grabbed a hold of that and began to look for what was coming. I can't imagine, all this sex slave thing where they kidnap young ladies and sell them off somewhere, and rich people pay the people who buy them to have whatever pleasure they want from them, and when the girl's no good anymore, they kill her and kidnap another girl. I can't imagine. You and I have never been introduced to anything anyway that kind of horrible. That's how some people spend the remainder of their lives. No way out. They're on an island somewhere, rich people travel to go there. No way out. But some of them, I'll guarantee you, were either Christians when they were kidnapped, so they took Jesus with them to their den of terrors, or they'd been in Sunday school or had a Christian friend. And after they were mad at God for the situation, there came a time when they thought, God's all I got. And they put their faith in him. And maybe they never heard a message about the truth about now. And maybe to them, it was hard to look past what they saw. But if their faith is in Jesus Christ, their most horrible life on this planet is only temporary and one day will pass. And they will go to a place where they carry none of the baggage. If somebody could find them and liberate them, they'd bring all that baggage back home with them. It'd be a much, physically, it'd be pain-free back here, except for whatever damage has been done. But mentally, they'd be in anguish for the rest of their life for what they went through. We couldn't even begin to grasp it. Paul was persecuted in other ways than that, but he was persecuted. He said, I die daily, referring to those persecutions. Every day I get up and go out to tell people about Jesus, and I face death, day in and day out. As surely as that soldier on the battlefield, every morning he gets up and goes to battle, could be the day. Could be the day he doesn't get back to base. He faces death every day. That's what Paul said. I die daily. Every single day, my life is at risk. So Paul said, when you learn the truth about now, then you don't put your eyes on it because it's going to pass away. What makes bad times so difficult for us to endure? It's all we see. So we see how bad the times are. Paul said, I don't look at that because it's temporary. I got my eyes on what you can't see, on eternity. What is absolutely great about those things that are not seen at this moment that Paul is talking about, they are far more exceeding an eternal weight of glory. The God who loves us has prepared that eternal weight of glory for us, and those things will last forever. So putting it on our terms, because none of us have faced the persecution Paul has, but maybe we've all been disappointed in our lot in life at times. Maybe we would have liked to have been a famous singer, a famous ball player, a rich man, a rich woman. Maybe, who knows? I mean, we always can look at, if the plate's half full, we can see, instead of thanking God for the half a plate of food we have, we tend to complain about the half we don't have. And so all of us at times might, I shouldn't say, I'm sure there are some optimists out there that never think about what they don't have. They just enjoy what they do. But most of us have times where we think, my God. I'm a teacher, a Bible teacher. I would to God I had 1,000 people in church every Sunday.
Me too.
Would to God.
Yes.
But would to God doesn't change. I don't have 1,000 people in church. Now, I happen to have the best 20, 25 people on the planet in church, but I don't have 1,000 folk. We can all think of what we don't have. But all that is temporary. I am 69. I went to bed last night, I was 36. How many of you people up in years know it feels about that quick? You're this age and then suddenly you're this age. I tell you what, when I was 30, I thought I was old.
Yeah.
And I've had 39 years since. And I'm going to tell you, if the Lord tarries, I don't have 39 more. The chances of my making it to 108 are slim and none.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I die, the whole world won't grieve. Most of them will never notice. No flags will be flying half-mast. But it's okay, because when I die, I don't care what you do. I used to drive a garbage truck and say, when I die, pack me. Pack me in the back. Throw me in the back into that thing and flip that handle. Pack me. Because I don't care. Because by the time you pack me, I'm in heaven. Amen. By the time they buried your mom, she'd been in heaven, 3 or 4 days already. We don't care what happens here. What we do for people after they're dead is for us. It doesn't benefit them at all. We do it for us to make us feel better.
Funerals were for us.
We need to know the truth about now.